Leo lived in a house that was perfectly quiet. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like a thick blanket smothering any sound of laughter. The walls were painted in cheerful colors, and family photos hung in the hallway. But for Leo, the entire world existed in the reflection of his mother's eyes. And in that reflection, he was a ghost. From his earliest memory, Leo learned that his presence caused a subtle, almost imperceptible flinch in his mother. When he'd run to her, arms outstretched after a fall, she'd pat his back with stiff, mechanical fingers, her gaze already looking over his shoulder, at the wall, at anything but him. Her sighs when he entered a room were like a winter draft under the door. He learned the language of her silence. The sharp intake of breath meant he was too loud. The way she would deliberately put down a book meant he was an interruption. The way her mouth became a thin, hard line meant he had done something wrong. Though he never knew what his existence, it seemed, was the original sin. He was 5 years old when he built his first fortress. It wasn't made of stone or wood, but of stillness. He discovered that if he sat perfectly motionless in the corner of the living room, tucked behind an armchair, he could make himself so small that his mother would sometimes forget he was there. And in those precious, fleeting moments of being forgotten, the heavy air in the house would lighten just a fraction. He would watch the dust motes dancing in a sunbeam and feel a strange, sad peace. This was his first victory, to become invisible, but a child cannot live in a vacuum. A soul craves connection, and so Leo, the brilliant, adaptive little being that he was, developed a strategy. If his mere presence was a burden, perhaps his usefulness could be a currency for a sliver of warmth. At 6, he became a tiny, silent servant. He would watch his mother's coffee cup like a hawk, and the moment it was half empty, he would scramble to the kitchen, his small hand struggling with the heavy carafe, carefully, so carefully, pouring the hot liquid to the brim without spilling a drop. He would present it to her, a hopeful offering. She would take it without a word. Sometimes, if he was very lucky, there would be a faint, almost non-existent grunt of acknowledgement. It was like a drop of water in a desert. He learned to preempt her needs. Fluff the pillow before she sat down. Line up her shoes perfectly by the door. His little heart would hammer in his chest when he performed these tasks, a silent prayer on repeat. Please, let this be enough. Please, let me be good. His greatest treasure was a single, frayed sticker he'd gotten at the doctor's office, a smiling star. He had pressed it onto the headboard of his bed. At night, he would whisper to the star, telling it about his day, his small sorrows, his desperate hopes. The star never flinched. The star never sighed. The star just listened. It was the only thing in his world that seemed happy to see him. School should have been a refuge, but it was just another, more confusing battlefield. He saw other children run to their mothers at pickup, being swept up in hugs, their chatter met with laughter. Leo would walk slowly to his mother's car, climb silently into the back seat, and stare out the window at those other worlds, those other planets where love was given freely, like air. He couldn't understand it. What did those children do that he didn't? What was the secret magic they possessed that made them so inherently lovable? He began to study them. He noticed that they asked for things. A cookie, a toy, a story. So one day, his heart thumping so hard he felt dizzy, Leo pointed to a colorful ice cream stand. "Can I?" he started to whisper. His mother's look didn't just say no. It was a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance, as if he'd asked for a solid gold spaceship. "Don't be greedy, Leo," she said, her voice cold and flat. And in that moment, the lesson was seared into his soul. Your needs are an inconvenience. Your desires are greed. You are a drain. So he stopped asking for everything. At home, the silent war continued. One afternoon, he was trying to be extra good, coloring a picture for her at the kitchen table. He concentrated, his tongue sticking out, staying perfectly within the lines. It was a picture of the two of them, holding hands under a smiling sun. He used all his favorite colors. He thought it was perfect. He presented it to her, his small hands trembling slightly. She glanced at it for a second, then turned back to the sink. "Don't clutter the house with paper, Leo. Throw it away." The words were not shouted. They were casual, dismissive. But to Leo, they were a nuclear bomb detonating in the core of his being. He didn't cry. He just walked to the trash can, opened it, and placed his perfect, colorful family inside. As the lid closed, he made a decision. A fundamental, life-altering decision. The problem wasn't his actions. It wasn't that he wasn't helpful enough, or quiet enough. The problem was him. His very essence was wrong. He was a flawed, broken thing, and the hatred he felt was simply the correct, rational response to his own brokenness. This was the birth of his inner monster. The monster's voice was a whisper at first, but it soon grew to a constant, vicious commentary. You see, you thought a drawing would work? You're stupid. Why would she want a picture of you? You're ugly. You are a clutter. You are trash. You belong in the bin with the drawing. Leo carried this monster with him everywhere. It lived in his head and fed on every glance, every sigh, every silent meal. He was now completely alone, trapped in a cage with a creature that hated him, a creature he knew was right. His survival strategy shifted. If he couldn't earn love, he would earn distance. He built walls. At 8 years old, he became the quiet one. The teacher would mark him well-behaved on his report card. She didn't know that his good behavior was not compliance, but retreat. He stopped offering to help his mother. The hope had finally died, and in its place was a cold, heavy certainty. He would move through the house like a ghost, no longer trying to be seen, but perfecting the art of being unseen. He spent more and more time in his own mind. He created elaborate fantasy worlds where he was a knight, or an astronaut, or just a normal boy in a normal family where people smiled at each other. In these daydreams, he was powerful, he was loved, he was wanted. Reality was the nightmare, his imagination was the escape. This is Leo. This is the little boy, sitting in a silent house, staring at a faded sticker of a star, a monstrous voice whispering in his ear, his heart a tangled knot of longing and self-loathing. He doesn't know that this is not how all children live. He doesn't know that the monster is a liar. He only knows that he hurts, all the time, in a place too deep for tears. He has learned the central, devastating truth of his life, that the greatest loneliness is not being alone in a room, but being alone in the presence of the person who was meant to love you most. And the story of Leo is the story of millions. It's a story written not in dramatic events, but in the crushing weight of 1,000 silent moments. It's a story of a soul learning, against its own nature, how to build a prison for itself. But, and this is the most important part of the story, it is not where the story ends, because even the most carefully built prisons have a key. And that key is often found in the most unexpected of places. But that is a story for another time. For now, we sit with Leo in the quiet. We witness his pain. We understand that his behavior, the quiet, the people-pleasing, the withdrawal, is not a personality. It is a monument to his survival. It is the brilliant, heartbreaking architecture of a child trying to protect a tiny, flickering flame from a storm of indifference. If you see yourself in Leo, if you know this story in your bones, I need you to hear one thing, right now. Look at that little boy. He did what he had to do to survive. He was brilliant, he was strong, he was resourceful, and he was never, ever the problem. The fault was never in the reflection of his eyes, but in the cracked mirror he was forced to look into. The first step to healing is to see little Leo, and finally, tell him he is not alone anymore.